I'd like to introduce our first keynote speaker. I first learned about Sonja Trauss when I read a book about her called The Golden Gates, which was written in 2020 and tells the story of San Francisco's housing crisis and how onerous land use laws and NIMBYs were preventing developers from constructing much-needed housing. Sonja is a community organizer, urban activist, and housing advocate based in the San Francisco Bay Area. She is known for her relentless pursuit of affordable housing solutions and her innovative approach to addressing the nation's housing crisis. In 2014, Sonja founded the San Francisco Bay Area Renters Federation, otherwise known as SF-BARF, which is a grassroots organization that advocates for more housing development to meet the demands of the Bay Area's growing population. She has been a vocal supporter of pro-housing policies and has been involved in various political campaigns aimed at increasing the housing supply. In 2019, she founded YIMBY Law, a national organization with the mission of ending housing shortages and achieving affordable, sustainable, and equitable housing for all. Sonja is a graduate of Temple University and holds a master's degree in economics from Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri. Her work has been featured in numerous media outlets, including the New York Times, The Guardian, and NPR. All the way from California, please welcome to the stage Sonja Trauss.
Come on down.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good luck. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, for spending part of your afternoon with me. Yes, in my backyard, this was a movement of housing consumers getting organized. I started in 2014, as mentioned, and it was a surprise, I think, to a lot of people because the beneficiaries of new housing, who knows where they are, right? Where were you when your house was built? Maybe not even born, right? So we realized that we had to start speaking up for housing, even if it wasn't someplace like we were gonna live. So we have two organizations, Yes in My Backyard and YIMBY Action, and I'm the ED of Yes in My Backyard. And we have two organizations basically because of tax law. One is for politics, supporting candidates, and the other one is basically everything else, including lawsuits enforcing state law. You guys have a new amazing state law, something 2003. And you might, it hasn't gone into effect yet, but once it goes into effect and you try to use it, you might find that cities lose your application or they don't have the same interpretation as you. And as a developer, you will probably not want to sue the city for a number of reasons I guess I don't have to list. And that's what happened in California. We had amazing state laws. For 40 years, we've actually had very helpful pro-housing state laws designed thinking the developer was going to enforce them. Of course, the developers didn't. Luckily, California has pretty expansive standing rules and allows housing organizations to enforce state laws, and that's what we do. And now that we've done that, the Attorney General has gotten involved also because they see that there's political support for it. And we really facilitate, enacting these things because passing them is one thing, but actually getting a new reality is a different one. We have our membership. We have 43 chapters in 19 states. They support political candidates and legislation. On the true nonprofit side, we also support specific housing developments. That's what those arrows mean, that the lawsuits support the legislation and the housing, and the grassroots organizing, supports everything. Oh, here are our 43 chapters in 19 states. You might notice that we don't have one in Portland, Maine, yet. I think there are regular people who want to support housing out there. So anytime, just give us a call. So these are some of the things that we do, right? Phone banking, attending a public meeting. It's really important to have regular people speaking up for housing. And you guys are all regular people, right? You might think I'm in the industry, so it doesn't matter. But you have an address, you have an elected official, contact that person. They really do not hear from the public as much as you might think. It does make a difference, especially if you door knock, you phone bank, and then later there's something in your community, some housing, somebody's proposing, and you testify in favor of it, they'll remember you. This is us at a public meeting. What what it looks like to organize. One of the main, the important reason for pro-housing folks to show up is that if people who support housing, or if people who don't really care, right? Actually, in a lot of communities, you'll propose something, most people actually could care less. Maybe a little counterintuitively, if you really don't have an opinion, you should still contact your elected official and be like, guess what? This doesn't matter to me either way. Not gonna ruin my life. Because otherwise, there's this small group of people who are speaking for you. They're saying, this is the worst thing, this is gonna make me get a divorce, like I'm never gonna be able to walk my dog again, or whatever, I'll never be able to find parking again. And if that's all the elected officials or appointed officials hear, then they're gonna think that those people are speaking for everyone, and they need a reminder that there are people out there that actually have other things going on, are not gonna vote them out, or even better, really support the housing. So yeah, Golden Gates, yes to the city. It's been a very big surprise, but this movement of, I guess, mostly millennials, although, all age ranges are part of our chapters, has really gotten attention, and, people want to write books about it. I'm still amazed. So this is our little illustration about, like, organizing people. It both deploys and builds power. This is a point I actually wanted to make for this audience. The previous one is something our graphics person made, and this is the one that I made that kind of tells the story. Maybe counterintuitively, a lot of people think of political capital, and it might be true for an industry group or if you're like a paid lobbyist, as something that you just spend. That if you ask for something, you have a limited number of asks. If you ask for something, you're kind of spending political capital. But the thing about grassroots political capital, when you're organizing, again, regular people, contact their electeds, it's actually more like, like love, like the more you give, the more you have, or fire, like you light another candle, the first flame does not diminish. Investing, working out, right? The more energy you expend working out, the more strength you have later. That the more asks you make, the more organizing you do, the more housing you support, the more political capital you have, because the more visibility you have. So don't be afraid to make a lot of asks, if you are doing grassroots political organizing. So I'll talk about, policies for abundant housing, really, there's a range, right? We've got to legalize housing, so that's zoning reform, streamline permitting, that's what I'll talk about today. Funding affordable housing too, right? Fixing broken incentives, this is, actually ignore that one for now, and increasing housing stability. So housing stability are things like right to counsel, we love that. Whatever protective laws there are for tenants should actually get enforced, that seems pretty moderate. And then various kinds of anti-rent gouging. But legalizing housing and streamlining permitting, that's really our bread and butter. That's like what we got into this, to do. And I do want to emphasize, I have to tell you that I didn't know this when I started in California, but there was this horrible division. On one hand, you had people that were like, only more housing, no rent control, no subsidy, right? And then you had other people who were like, only subsidy and rent control, no, relaxing permitting. And we were created because for decades, those were the options. And that's not adequate, So we're a bunch of people who are saying, why not both? Like, why can't we relax, zoning, build more housing, allow the market to work, and also supplement the market with more subsidy and, maybe fairer rules between landlords and tenants. We can do both. So I really discourage getting into this mean back and forth where each side is taking solutions off the table when really we need it all. You guys already did this, I think, legalized ADUs all throughout the state. This is kind of like level 0. This is the easiest thing for states to do, although New York did not succeed in doing it. As you can see, it's kind of boring, but it's relatively popular, it's easy to pass. This is some results from California. We passed our first ADU legalization state law in 2016, and it had immediate effects. You know, went up every year. I think 2020 was kind of suppressed by COVID, but 20% of new housing units are accessory dwelling units, which is, I guess, a victory for ADUs. I actually think it's a little bit of a failure of other types of housing. ADUs are nice, but if you have a real housing shortage, basically a lot of times with the ADU, you're not actually building new residential square footage. So you're sort of, you know, you're adding a new kitchen at the end of the day. And that can be good, but it's really might not be solving your full problem. The other thing is ADUs, sometimes they're just right out there. Anyone can move in on the market, but sometimes it's like, it's just your, you know, it's your kids or something who would otherwise be living with you anyway. So it's good, okay? Get excited about it. One of the things about it though is that every year since 2016, there have been like 5 or 10 like maintenance bills, because we passed these laws. Homeowners are like, great, City Hall, I want to do an ADU. And City Hall's like, well, but you have to provide parking for it. And then the legislators have to go back and say, okay, cities can't require you to provide parking for your, you know, new ADU. It's just every single year, there's like a whole industry of closing loopholes. So that will be your life going forward. With this new law. It's a great thing, but you're just gonna have to keep going back and back and back to make sure that it works. Just so you know. This was another thing, level 1, process improvement. You know, later on we're gonna be talking about local control. Some of the anxiety for housing politics is this fight, you know, who should be making, you know, who should be in charge? Is it the state? Is it the localities? Ironically, when I was doing this talk, I was like, what are really the state laws that we need? And they're actually about things like process. Like process is local control. You know, you guys did your zoning. Locality, pick what you want for your community, that's fine. But once you have it, do it, right? And that is amazingly hard to do. Like cities will say, okay, fine, here's our apartment area. Okay, now I want to build an apartment building. Oh, well, I don't know, you know? So we had in 2017, we had SB 35, which was pitched as streamlining the entitlement process. I was kind of amazing that California voters were actually aware of this long entitlement being a problem. The media and I guess industry groups had done a really great job, and actually people's own experience had done a great job of making that legible to voters, you know, that things were taking a long time to get through. And so when this was pitched as streamlining the entitlement process, people were about it, you know? So it requires either 50 or 10% inclusionary, depending on the city. It does not overrule local zoning, but it does have a union requirement. And it's been very successful, mostly for 100% affordable housing, but some market rate also, because of the high inclusionary rate. Florida very recently passed its own similar kind of process improvement bill, although there it was pitched as an inclusionary bill, you know, for affordable housing. But very similar idea, this combination of like a high inclusionary, but what you get back is a streamlined, by right administrative process that the city cannot interfere with. And the Florida one kind of is even better because it partially overrules local zoning. So you guys also have a similar, package. So it's really like these kind of package deals that can work at the state level. The next one is level A, because I actually couldn't decide which one was the best. There's a 1 and an A. I didn't want to put either one of them as 2 or B. Is what I mentioned before, objective standards and following local zoning. Something that's been a bit incremental, but very, very helpful, very successful in California is we basically have something called the Housing Accountability Act, and it says that cities, they cannot disapprove projects using subjective conditions. which is a roundabout way of saying that you have to have objective rules. You know, you can't say it doesn't match neighborhood character, the design is ugly. You have to say it's 35 feet, you know, the roof pitch is 15%, you know, whatever. You have to have objective rules. I have some examples, and you know, this is a very important, like, anti-corruption, you know, measure, right? We want anybody to be able to read the zoning, understand what's proposed, what's allowed, propose that, and then get it, instead of what we have now, which is a lot of times, you know, cronyism. Like, if you have a good relationship with the local electeds, then you can get something through, but if you don't, you know, maybe you don't. And this is actually why, you know, some people will be like, oh, I bet developers really love what you do. And many developers do, but some developers are self-aware, you know, and they're like, what? My value add is these relationships. And you know, if you're the type of developer that does that because they have to, then look forward to an exciting future where you can get back to the part that you love, which is actually imagining the housing, putting the financing together, managing the process, and you don't have to toady around and have coffees with electeds. But if you're in it because you love the coffees with electeds, that's sunsetting. We're trying to push that out because that's something that really suppresses housing production. It makes it unfair, you know, closes it to new entrants. We really want anybody to be able to get into this industry. So the last little bit I'm going to talk about kind of our political philosophy for abundant housing. It's all about diversity and abundance. And, you know, every state has diversity at the state level, right? The region has diversity, the county, the city. What's difficult and actually very radical is the idea that at the level of the community, really your neighborhood, you're going to have rich and poor living together. We often take it for granted. Obviously, there's a good part of town and a bad part of town. Obviously, not obvious. That is not obvious. That is a public policy decision that we have made and we keep making over and over again, and it has horrible consequences because when you have a good part of town, then you have good schools, and if you have a bad part of town, you have bad schools. And other public amenities. You know, have like the nice rec center and the bad rec center. Because there are some public amenities that are provided at a geographic level, in order to have real equality, we have to make sure that different kinds of people are living, you know, together, so we all have access to the good public amenities, clean air, for instance. So this is our radical vision, and it's why, again, I'm going back to the local control issue. You know, you'll hear people say that every community is different. Our community is special. You know, one size doesn't fit all. But we can't have like special communities. You know, we can't have communities that are too special to have certain type of person living there. We can't get confused and treat communities like people or households. The problem with zoning is it enforces conformity and separation. You guys are in the industry, you know what I'm talking about. This is an example of a subdivision in Florida. So you have separation of retail from housing, separation of apartment buildings from single-family homes, and everything within the zoning, you know, has to be the same, which is why it's kind of a funny thing to hear proponents of local control say, you know, one size doesn't fit all, because zoning is a very one-size-fits-all process, right? It's like you want to live in this community, and you say, well, maybe I don't want a big yard, maybe I'd rather have an apartment, some shared amenities. No Coke, only Pepsi, right? There's only one product, and that doesn't facilitate a diverse community. So, you know, here's a picture of something where you have a bunch of different kinds of housing. The problem with this picture is everything's 3 stories, although economically, like, that's probably realistic. You know, in most places, you don't build more than 3 stories because it's actually just not even really worth it. That's something a lot of people don't realize. You know, they think it's important to have height limits because if you don't have height limits everywhere, there's going to be a 50-story building, which is ridiculous. Like, if there's no height limits, most things are still going to be pretty short because it's just expensive to build taller. But yeah, but so we want there to be different kinds of buildings. This is a little bit of a straw man, but you'll find that you'll have the same guy saying, you know, a one-size-fits-all solution is not going to work, but also we must protect neighborhood character. So which one is it, right? This is what I was saying before, is that if your neighborhood character is that this is a place where it's only big houses. Well, that doesn't work for everybody. We don't want a one-size-fits-all. You know, we want to let the interaction between the market, you know, the developer, the landowner, we want people to be able to pick the variety that is good for them, including, you know, allowing neighborhood serving retail. And neighborhood character, we don't need to say neighborhood character ever again, because it's totally vapid. You know, if there's something in your neighborhood that you love, your tree canopy, your high quality public services, you know, something about the retail mix, say that's what you want. Especially, you know, when you're talking to an elected or a bureaucrat. If you say neighborhood character, they might not know what you mean, right? You say, oh, I want to protect the neighborhood character. You're thinking of the tree canopy, and they're thinking about retail, and they're like, got you, me too. We're working on that. Well, you haven't had a communication, you know? So at best, you're not getting across what you want to get across. You're not helping yourself or your neighbors actually develop a strategy because you don't really know what it is you're trying to protect. At worst, you are promoting sameness for its own sake, or it's a dog whistle for something that you don't want to say out loud. And if you're, you know, thinking like, ooh, you know, this is a fancy neighborhood, this is a white neighborhood, but I can't say that, that's your conscience. You can't say it, you shouldn't really be thinking it. Like, it's vapid. So if you're reaching for neighborhood character, you're not going in the right direction. You should be specific about what it is you want. It'll help you get it. Yeah, I mean, the praxis for abundant housing, as opposed to earlier I talked about the philosophy, is participating in local politics. What we have now, again, is a system where we are making decisions kind of at the municipal level. And the reason that we're always going to have a housing shortage if we do that is that there's this phenomenon of concentrated harms and distributed benefits, that the people who know about the housing development near them already live in the community. They don't need more housing, they already live there. And they perceive, you know, what the harms are. Oh, there'll be more traffic, because mostly it's the biggest complaint. And so they're the ones that go and speak to the public officials, whereas the future beneficiaries don't know that the project is happening, and the benefit is distributed. It has a very little marginal impact, right? Like, if you're not gonna live there, then the, you know, 0.5% decrease in rent that it'll provide around the whole region is very small. So if we keep making making decisions based on the voices from the immediate neighbors, that process is going to underproduce housing inherently. It's a, you know, not incentive-aligned process. And so in order to correct for that, while that process is in place, is that pro-housing people have to get involved. You have to be the guy that stands up, the lady, non-binary person, stands up and is like, actually housing is good, I don't know who's going to live there, some new neighbor, maybe they'll be interesting, maybe we'll be friends. The other thing, I mean, the reason that the state is trying to get involved now is that we've run this experiment for local politics, right? We've had zoning for 100 years. Oh wait, where did I miss one of my slides? Hold on. Ah, here he is. Right, communities should have local control. Great. And then that same guy says, I support housing, but not here. So you're not using your local control responsibly. And that's what we've seen, is that we give communities local control, and what do? Do they say, oh, great, you know, there's a regional need for a wide variety of housing, low-income housing, we're gonna build it here in our community and also everywhere? No, they're like, I'm sure the next town over will take care of it. And the next town over is like, I'm sure someone else will take care of it. And then the only place that's excited about building is economically depressed areas, because all the well-resourced places don't feel like they need taxpayers, and then we don't have economic integration. So, you know, if you really want local control, you really have to be involved with making sure that you're using that local control responsibly. But frankly, again, we've run this experiment. It's been 100 years. It has not produced the diverse communities or the low-income housing or even the middle-income housing that we really need. So that's why it's important to get involved, and that's why the state is starting to get involved. This community meeting is waiting for you. I know a lot of people are actually at these community meetings for work, but maybe you can get your friends and relatives. You can sign up at yimbyaction.org, or just do it on your own. So thank you again for having me. I think that's it. Yeah, you can email me anytime.